fact, I found your name in. It's actually, you were supposed to be 3:40 p.m. yesterday.
So you were yesterday. But that's fine. That's
well,
fine.
there has been a muck-up because the email definitely said 10:45 today.
Okay.
Oh.
No, that's just a mistake. I had so much the same email where someone had 10 minutes rather than 5.
Tell us what's on your mind.
Yeah, Kia ora. It's my first time making a submission, so you'll have to be with me. Can I introduce myself briefly? People say, how do you fit into Hawke's Bay? Well, I've been a ratepayer Central Hawke's Bay with forestry for 30 years. I've got some track record there. I've recently come to live in Napier. Most of my background, my just working life, well, like all of us, I've done a few things, but the main thread was government, working inside government, both here in New Zealand and overseas, offshore. And as such, I have experienced the demands of very well-spoken business interests for public money, public funding. I have been there before, and my degree is economics, so I know some of the economic arguments for public funding going to business, and let's just rehearse those. Of these, I think the strongest argument is what in the trade is called the infant industry argument. Here's an industry that has excellent prospects, it's got wide interest within the region, and it needs a leg up. And there's a case for that, no doubt about it. Now let's run that rule over the tourism industry. Well, indeed, it's had excellent prospects, still got excellent prospects, and just indeed it has had a leg up, and it is. Sorry.
Ian was on the list for yesterday, and there's been a mistake. Either he's made or we've made it. So we thought he turned up now, we'll give him a chance. We will have his say. I forgot to say at the very beginning that each speaker has 5 minutes.
Oh.
It'll take the 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Don't give any chance to ask you questions, but it's your right to take the call and give us your opinion. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just need to let the councillor know what's actually happened here.
Thank you. Apologies.
Okay, well, I'm more than halfway through, thank you,
Well, that's
Mr. Chairman. So I was on, the industry argument for a leg up, and was saying run this rule over the tourism sector to industry, and it's had its leg up, and now it would appear it's seeking a permanent allocation. No. Shock horror, and good on council for calling the bluff. Excellent, called their bluff. So let's not say permanent allocation, let's talk about phase out. That's the language we're using now. You've had your leg up, sir, you're thriving. Now we're going to give you a phase out. So the smart money, it may be immediate cessation is a bit rough. So we go for phase out, maybe something like 50% next year, 25%, following year, nothing. So that's all I want to say. There's a shock horror element here, and we've got an excellent industry, and we want to give every support, but we also want to phase out from public funding, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank
well, you were very clear on your thoughts. Now, councillors, any questions?
Is your surname Keens?
Sorry.
Is your surname Keens?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I just went back to the Ian from yesterday.
Yes, and I thought that the arguments were very well summarised in the local paper, yesterday's local paper, which had an excellent article on the arguments that had been coming before council. I thought very well summarised. The journalists had it right.
Tom, and then Peter.
So I'm a little, your submission is on page 71 here for folks who haven't located it yet. So what you're just saying here is it a phased reduction, or would
Yeah,
you say
yeah.
is there any public good justification for an investment in tourism by us, or would you just phase it out completely?
I'm advocating complete phase out. Yes, I am. Yep.
Any other Peter?
Yeah, so I noticed in your submission you made some comments about sea level rise and
Oh, yeah.
coastal erosion and the possibility of retreat from the coast.
Yep.
This is more a comment than a question. You're probably aware that we've completed a study of the coast, which is very much involved local communities, and they've come up with a strategy which has been adopted by the council now, which looks at 100 years. And in fact, managed retreat is not proposed until the second half of that 100-year period. So there's no plan at this point in time to move away from the coast for at least 50 years. So I don't think that's premature.
If the I mean, what we're wondering is how fast it's going to come, aren't we? I mean, if it comes faster, the managed retreat will be faster. Won't it? I mean,
And so there'll be a 10-year review,
Okay,
10-yearly
excellent.
reviews
Yeah,
of the strategy. Yeah.
Excellent. Good.
Are there any other questions from councillors? Before, thank you, Ian. Really appreciate you coming in, and hopefully we got the day wrong, not you got the day wrong, but someone got the day wrong. We were very fortunate to be able to slip you in there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and I've pulled councillors back, and welcome to my dear friend, Henari O'Keefe. Perhaps he could entertain us for 10 minutes.
Got your guitar? Where's the guitar?
Get the CE to get the council guitar out.
He's been very busy today finding a house for a homeless person. It's a sort of routine for him on a daily basis. So, in the streets doing the work. So we still have, I guess, for tourism, Hawke's Bay, the big conversation is 10:45. So
They're here.
they're here.
They're out in the lobby.
Oh, why don't we
I
bring
don't
them
think
in?
all of them are here yet, though.
Oh.
No.
Is Keith Moretta not turning up?
It appears not.
Appears not. Do you want to get them in and see if they're ready to go?
Well, this is the one I've drawn on, so
Yeah, no.
haven't seen your copy of it. Oh, no, that's yesterday, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's your writing there.
So this is a long session, isn't it, on tourism? I know you've all waited with great anticipation for it.
Mr Chair, if we do commence a little earlier, I think we could pull forward the lunch break and pull the whole day forward.
We've been trying to pull forward Sarah and Anne. I think it'd be really hard to pull all those other people.
Will we start tomorrow's?
We could do, it's up to councillors to decide. You could start some of the discussion.
I figured what I would like to move on. It's a long 3 days, isn't it?
Mr Chairman, I've got a contrary opinion. I think the day was here for submitters. It may end earlier, but I think we need an evening to reflect before we get into decision making. Otherwise, you're likely to be influenced by the last person you heard today.
It's never affected me.
Good. You want just that one, or the left hand of the mouse? The left.
Okay.
We might give a formal welcome.
Ia. E oku ngā rangatira, ngā nau mahara mai ki roto i tēnei huihuinga. Ngā raupu manuhiri, tēnā koutou, ngā mahara mai ki roto i tēnei hui. Kanui te mihi atu o ngā kānohi oro o tēnei rohe. Ngā mahara mai, ngā mihi nunui ki a koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Welcome.
Welcome, George, and welcome Hinuai and Kim. It's always good to have you along as well, and Hamish. So, and welcome to the other people who are clustered into our chambers. We've had an empty chamber all morning, but it's a great delight to have you all here today, especially Lawrence, who I know has flown specially back from Wellington to be with us here today. So, welcome to everybody. So, George, we've basically put out a very large section of the morning for you, the whole morning, up till from now to lunchtime. So, the floor is yours, how you want to use that time, yourself, and what time you allocate for questions from councillors will be your decision.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Kia ora tātou, nei reira mihi, kua hu mai nei, ina haui whā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you very much for providing us the opportunity to talk to our submission, and also thank you very much for being early. We'll take the additional time gladly. There are four of us here that will open the presentation, and following that we would like to take questions on the submission we make, and then we'll open the floor to other submitters that are here representing the industry. I'm joined today by Hinuai, who runs Napier Māori Tours, by Hamish Prinz, who runs his own tour company, and Kim Thorpe, who's got, as you know, quite a history when it comes to tourism in the Bay, and also the tourism entity. And as part of our submission, we wanted to talk a little bit about our proposal to you, but also for you to hear from the coalface of two operators who actually spend their time in the industry and are developing the product. So just to kick things off, I'd like to first of all say a sincere thank you to the Regional Council, because 3 years ago you responded to a request that we made to increase the funding for Hawke's Bay tourism on the basis that we'd have some economic results. That has been achieved. The tourism dollar in this region over the last 12 months is 636 million, a growth of 6% to the year end. And obviously this is the sort of growth that we wanted to achieve, and it's the sort of growth that we want to continue. The other thing that this has provided is as I think as you would have seen from the submissions that have been made, which are in favour of retaining the funding, that it has unified the tourism industry behind a single promotional entity and also a single strategy. And that's been incredibly important for Hawke's Bay, and is important for Hawke's Bay into the future. Just quickly, look, we're not here because we just love tourism. The reason you have a tourism industry is economic growth. It's as simple as that. It provides one of the biggest economic drivers in your region, and that's the sole reason that anybody would be involved in it. We are different to other industries, and this has come up a lot. We don't have the ability to levy members. We don't have large members that can be where we can have a requirement for them to fund it. It's as common without the tourism industry. You've got a lot of small operators. We're not like a dairy industry or a horticultural industry who can compulsorily levy their members for funds. We can't do that, and it's the same situation internationally. So that's why we tend, as an industry, to be funded by either governments or local governments. We've got some recommendations to make. These are part of the submission. Our preferred option is to retain the current level of funding of 1.8 million. We have, however, spent a long time considering the situation that we're faced with and consideration that you're faced with. And we understand the pressures that come on councillors and your funding. And we believe a compromise could well be that the funding cut that you're proposing for next year is enacted, but that the funding be held at that level for the next 3 years, that namely 1.5 million. We believe we can work with that and work with the industry and carry on with a positive approach to tourism for the region. We are extremely worried if the current alternative of reducing the funding by that amount every year for the next 3 years, taking us back to the funding we had in 2011, we believe that would be incredibly damaging to the industry, and so does the industry itself. So we put that on the table as a genuine attempt on our part to see if we can come to an arrangement so that we can continue to have the very positive working relationship we've had with the Hawke's Bay Regional Council into the future and continue the positive growth of tourism. We believe both options require us to work with you in developing other funding options, and we've looked at the alternative funding options, and one of them we support. You're proposing the 50-50 commercial residential split. This has the impact of actually reducing residential rates that are applied to tourism by 30%. And when we look at the submissions that you have, a lot of those submissions against it have been from residents concerned about rates. So we believe that is a positive, and that could help answer that concern. Secondly, we've been doing a little bit of work around what's called peer-to-peer properties, namely Airbnb. This is a new phenomenon in the tourism industry. It's been very hard to get to grips with it, but finally, and just recently, we're able to report that we've got good information. When we look at it for Hawke's Bay, we find that the Airbnb is now responsible for 10% of all accommodation. There are about 623 properties, that's their entire home properties in the region. There's about another 30% who are just beds and rooms. But the average daily rate's about $175. Quite a good occupancy rate at 48%, and an average revenue of, as you can see there, $19.21 per month. We believe that the opportunity exists for there to be a more equitable contribution from Airbnb properties to the rating base. Now, this is being looked at both Auckland and in Queenstown at the moment, and we believe we could follow some of the leadership there and introduce it here, and we'd have to work with you to do that. The last one is that the government, as you know, has made very clear signals about introducing a visitor levy next year. The critical factor in this will be how that levy is distributed. So, and in doing that, we will need to work with all local authorities to ensure that the regions are able to have their share of the levy, and that it will enable us to do the sorts of things we want for tourism in this region. Just a quick reminder, we're the only export industry in New Zealand that pays GST. So the government gets a lot from everything that happens, every visitor that comes here. They leave GST behind. None of the other export industries do. So if we look at what happens for us from now on in, obviously marketing and promotion of Hawke's Bay is the most important thing. We are the only agency that promotes Hawke's Bay outside of this region, and that's critical for business, for tourism, for all of your growth. The website is a key driver of the content. There is industry development work going on in terms of Maori tourism, and I'll just touch on that a little bit at the moment. The other element to this is that one of the arguments has been throughout this process is the environmental tourism, and it's not an argument like that in our view, it's both. And the tourism industry, in our view, can play a leading role in the environmental aspirations you have, because we are in a situation where through the visitor market, we can start promoting the very environmental qualities that you're seeking to achieve through the Regional Council. And we would like to work with you in a leadership role in that, in bringing the tourism industry in behind you in the sort of work we do, because all of us want to be part of an environment which is improving and continuing to improve. Just on Maori tourism, there's been a lot talked about this. At the last time when the funding was reviewed, we were asked to look at this. We now have board representation. This year we started a Maori graduate program. We planned to start it last year, but we had some difficulty convincing some people to come with us. That's been done, so we're that's up and running, and we plan to expand that next year. Our role is to support Maori tourism businesses. The real challenge in this area for Hawke's Bay is product. We need people to be able to develop product. We need to be able to help them in developing that and understanding the market and how they can get access to the wider industry. That's the sort of work that we can do, and that's the sort of work we want to do. There's also as part of the website, there's a dedicated Maori product section. Unfortunately, it needs more product in it, and that's one of the reasons that we're starting to look at that. But that's the challenge for us, and that's what we need to do, and we're looking at how we might improve that. Lastly, I'd just like to highlight the size of the prize. So this is a graph of visitor expenditure growth into Hawke's Bay over the next few years. If we continue on the current growth rate, we will be $1 billion industry for this region in 5 years. If we don't continue to fund the promotion and development of tourism, we could well lose hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's what we want to get. So even by 2021, we'll lift to about $2.3 million worth of spend a day. And as I say, it's an economic argument only. We can make this $1 billion industry within 5 years. We're very keen to do that, and we'd like to do it with you. So, in summary, we look forward to working with the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. You've been an exceptionally good partner of ours for the last 7 years, and we want to continue that work. We want to work positively with you, and we believe the proposal we've put forward is a way of achieving that. So, with those opening remarks, I'm going to hand over to Kim Thorpe, who I know is well known to all of you, just to talk a little bit about the situation that we're in at the moment and the importance of a regional tourism entity. Kim, thank you.
Apologies, but unlike George, I'm a bit more of a writer than a speech maker, so I might have to read my notes if that's okay. But so bear with me; it'll only be about 5 minutes. But so first, without getting straight into who should fund what, it is without doubt that a steadily diminishing budget will ensure the steady demise of Hawke's Bay tourism. National and regional tourism promotion has shifted dramatically in recent years. It's no longer about just gathering up some funds and firing some messages out there and seeing who turns up, assessing that, raising some more funds, and maybe giving it another go next year. It is about building both long-term plans and long-term relationships. It is now as much about attracting the right influences in as it is about sending the right messages out. That requires a consistent building of offerings and events, and more than ever, it requires respect and trust. Those core influences can turn their sights on anywhere else in the world, but more and more they're starting to turn their sights towards us. That's no coincidence. At last, they have a single entity they can talk to that has both the credibility of incredibly good people who know what they're on about and the credibility of being the official tourism entity of the region. The second point, I'm going to make 3 points. The second point is, if not Hawke's Bay tourism, then who? Well, sorry, but there is no such thing as a tourism industry in Hawke's Bay. We're a bunch of businesses that happen to also attract tourists. As much as we might love Splash Planet and the aquarium, we don't have a Waikiki, or a Disneyland, or a game reserve, or the Remarkables, or any other single independent destination driver that we can all attach ourselves to and watch the people pour in. For us as a region, it isn't that simple. Not only do we not have one standout reason to visit, we're not on a main route to anywhere, and we have others nipping at our heels. If it was left totally to us, the tourism industry, I genuinely believe we'd be in an even bigger mess than if it was left totally to you, the Regional Council. We've been there before. We've independently tried and failed on various wine and food festivals before Fork. What individual business or even sector would remotely think about coordinating something like the Big Easy? Who would fund or find sponsors for a marathon? The Art Deco Trust says their weekend wouldn't be attracting the increasing numbers of fame without the influence and increasing potency of Hawke's Bay tourism. Fork actually costs us as a business each year, as I'm sure it does most. However, it is without doubt that events like these are increasingly of benefit to the whole region. They're seeing people come back and bring friends, they're seeing people stay longer and therefore spend more, and as a result, they're seeing people seriously considering moving here with their families to live. So the first point, we've got a regional tourism organisation that is working and is well staffed and well respected. Second point, we haven't got a regional independent tourism industry, let alone one that is working, that has any staff or any respect. We do, though, have a diverse range of businesses throughout the region who almost without exception respect and assist the work of Hawke's Bay Tourism. Which leads to the third point, and without wishing to flatter egos too much, I simply don't believe we can be successful without Hawke's Bay Regional Council being the lead. Not quietly in the background somewhere, but in the lead. We've tried it through the unity of the private sector alone and could only get so far. Each individual council in Hawke's Bay has also tried to claim its own piece of independent fame and struggled to get any cut through of its message much beyond the Hawke's Bay gate. The best possible combination is what we've got now. There are 3 legs to the stool, each with a critical role. Pull one out and the whole thing falls over. First, we've got an RTO to be proud of, with great people showing tangible results. While a consistent budget is hugely important, this isn't just a numbers game. It's increasingly a relationship game, and we can't underestimate the importance of the quality of the people we have representing us. The second leg is us, the independent businesses who represent the so-called tourism industry. I'm sure, like you, for the first time we are seeing something working. For the first time, there is enormous respect for both the people and the plans of Hawke's Bay Tourism. We're not fighting it, we're getting behind it, giving our time to it, and providing both financial and tangible support to it. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, there is the manner of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council as the official, credible driver and leader. We shouldn't underestimate how important this is in a world where everyone is trying to find out who's the real deal and who's fake. The other important thing the Regional Council provides is a conduit to consistency. Yes, consistency of funds, but with that comes a consistency of planning and relationship building. That doesn't perhaps mean that it needs to provide all the funds, but it does need to be the one controlling tap of consistency. We're not asking you to do the work or the thinking or planning. There are good people now around that. We're asking, though, that you don't step back, that you remain at the head of the table and hopefully take pride in what is becoming a unified Hawke's Bay success story. This is such a tenuous thing to get right and such an easy thing to get wrong. We've had years of experience of the latter. It's only with your lead and your assurance of consistency that we can at last achieve the former. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
You can. I think we might move to questions. I'd love to hear you again, Henua. So how long would you take?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. You've got 2 minutes.
Okay, because we do have 2, and then we were going to hold for questions after.
Okay.
Okay.
After Henua.
After Hamish as well.
After Hamish, too. Okay. How long are you going to take, Hamish?
24 minutes.
Okay. Right, let's do it.
Mai tēnā koutou katoa, ko Henua Hawaikirangi tōku ingoa, ko te ingoa o tōku Pākihi, ko Napier Māori Tours. Tēnei te mihi kia koe api, mo tō mihi kia koutou I tēnei rā. Nā reira, I am one of the owners of Napier Māori Tours, me and my partner Cameron Ormsby, who used to work here at the Regional Council. And we started this business because there was a real passion for inviting our manuhiri, our visitors, to this beautiful place. So I have 2 parts of my kōrero that are very quick, and they are and kōrero. Okay, and the first part is that we are 1 year old, our business, and to start up, we came with a business plan to Hawke's Bay Tourism. We met with Annie and Hamish and the team, and they've helped us immensely with the start-up of the business. Without them, I don't think we would have got it as far as we have now. The second part is, as Napier Māori Tours, we have quite a strong environmental management plan within our business. So we dedicate profit that we make as a business towards growing our native trees for the waterways of Hawke's Bay. And so I actually have a koha here for Paul, because Paul helped pot these plants. Okay, so basically without the help of Hawke's Bay Tourism, Napier Māori Tours as a business couldn't have paid for the soil or the pots or the time we put into this. So, and I'd call him ringaropa, which means gets his hands dirty. Yeah, he's a hard worker, and every time we run a planting day, Paul is there. So, ngā mihi kia koutou.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Bye.
Hamish.
Thank you, Henua. Hamish.
Thank you, and thank you for your time today. I'm George, wonderful submission, and Kim, I've been through this, in this business for a number of years, 15 years. We started off Prinzi's Tours 15 years ago, where it was a small company, and the financial part of tourism Hawke's Bay was in very tough times. We've grown through that, and it's a credit to see how it's going now. We've just spent 4 days with Hawke's Bay Tourism at Trends, led by Annie and Hamish Evans. We approached Trends with a family point of view, as a group to look after the community of Hawke's Bay. So we went in and we emphasised our own business, and every morning we were told, don't forget Hawke's Bay. Annie and Hamish pushed that very, very firmly, because it's all about the family, the people of the region, and if we don't support the region, it won't survive. I understand exactly where you guys are coming with finances, and I think George's proposal there is probably something that we hopefully can work with. So thank you. But the biggest part at Trends that we played, and talking around the community of Trends, the buyers, the sellers, there was 500 buyers came in and roughly 500 sellers there. There was a lot of people looking at Hawke's Bay, and Hawke's Bay is on a little bit of a roll at the moment. It's called the fashion, and we've got to make the most of it while we can. A big part of our presentations every day was to get people to turn left at Taupo, which is essential to get them across here. I feel if our marketing finances actually do decrease, it's going to make a huge difference on our potential to push people across from the middle of the country to the east. We're a small area, and we don't have the draw cards possibly of some other areas. The region at the moment is absolutely booming on every industry. We've got apple, sheep and beef, horticulture, viticulture and tourism are all on a high. As we know, agriculture, viticulture and horticulture are very cyclic with weather, markets overseas and dollar exchange rates. Tourism's one that doesn't rely on that as much. It is market driven. And you know, even if we have a dry season in Hawke's Bay, it often is a plus to us, where the other environments will suffer. And everything being on a high at the moment, obviously the agricultural things, I've been a part of it for all my life. They will have cyclic things. I've seen times when apple growers have had to put into their pockets to actually pay for the packing of their fruit. Very difficult time. So it's all about looking after the people in the community. And I think Hawke's Bay Tourism, and that growth of that will help a lot of our ratepayers in our community by doing that. Just basically to sum up about the community, I think it is the people, and if we're wanting to go ahead with the region with your backing and make this area grow, we've got an amazing amount of young people coming to the region, and we need jobs for them, and in this industry it's pretty sustainable. So let's go forward from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamish, and thank you, everybody. So we will now get councillors an opportunity to ask questions of any one of you. Starting with Fenton, and then
Two very quick ones, Chair. One to George and then one to Hinawai. Do you spend all the money, George? Are you salting it away?
No, we've spent all the money.
Okay, so you're not building up, there's no reserves being built up anyway?
No.
Thank you. No. And Hinawai, why Hawke's Bay Tourism, why not the Māori Tourism Trust?
So I have a foot in each camp, so I'm a registered member with both organisations. When we first created the business, we had a business plan, and we were told, go and see Annie. We went and saw Annie. She had the contacts for us to be able to develop as a business. I joined with Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism, met with Toro, and from that point on, haven't had any support from Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism to develop our business. So that's putting it pretty plainly.
Neil?
Just a follow-up question to that, because that's interesting. What resources do you know Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism have to facilitate?
So just like New Zealand Māori Tourism, when I became a member, I put forth a letter in which I request certain things to help our business. Not funding, but support. And really all I got back from Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism is a spot on their Facebook page, an offering to a couple of workshops. But then I'm disappointed to see that delegations go over to Asia and we're not contacted as operators to ask, well, to know more about our product so they can market it.
And you would have had that opportunity with Hawke's Bay?
Oh,
Tourism?
definitely. With Hawke's Bay Tourism, constant support. I'm talking about at least monthly support for them to want to know about our product and sell it for us, to help us market it, which we can't do as a new business. We can't fly over to other countries to do that, but Annie and Hamish do that for us.
Sure. Sorry, Mr Chair, just to my question I want to ask in addition is, we had an excellent presentation from the Wine Growers Association earlier today, and on behalf of their 100 wineries in the region. Can you tell us what the contribution is from those wine growers in the region in cash to Hawke's Bay Tourism? They weren't clear and they said to ask you, so I'm asking you.
I think it would be as members. There'd be two parts to that. One as where they have joined Hawke's Bay Tourism as a member and they pay us obviously a subscription. The other is where they are involved in activities similar to what Kim referred to, where they actually provide goods and services as part of the promotional activity in terms of particularly say fork or something like that. In addition to that, they would provide a lot of
rather than muddying the
hosting.
waters, what's their cash contribution?
Direct
to
cash?
Yes.
No direct cash other than membership.
Okay.
And then in kind.
Other questions, councillors? Oh, Alan, sorry, Alan. Didn't see you over there in the corner.
Insignificant. Thanks very much for your presentation. Can you tell us how Hawke's Bay Tourism ranks nationally in terms of the publicly funded income per capita, or by some measure like that?
Yep. If you look at, we did do a review of how much people contribute to tourism. So if you look at the Hawke's Bay situation, if you divide it by rateable property, it's about $26. If you look at other regions around, Wellington's 82, Wanaka 108, Taupo 80, Dunedin's 37, Queenstown 220, Bay of Plenty 16, they're proposing a 43% increase. Ruapehu, $58, Marlborough I think about 28. So we're at the bottom end of funding per...
That's per rateable property.
Per rateable property.
Residential and commercial. So you are at the bottom.
We're down the bottom,
end.
yeah.
Thank you.
Paul?
Thank you, Chair. You've gone on about how great Hawke's Bay Tourism is going and how it's grown and everything else. I assume that there must be some dividend going back to your employees. How many members or how many involved in the tourism industry are part of the Living Wage Initiative?
Part of the...
Living Wage Initiative?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure?
No.
I only know of one, and that's Pastromini. So yeah.
Look, there's probably many, but it's not something that we canvass.
Well, I asked Annie that 6 weeks ago, and I would have assumed that somehow that information would have been filtered back, and clearly it hasn't.
Anybody here want to make a comment on that?
No, I wouldn't know either, but...
I am. Two?
It's two.
There's 70% of the people. Tom? Oh, and then I'll come to you up here.
I wouldn't question the value of marketing Hawke's Bay, though as Kim would know, a lot of marketers can't exactly say which half of their marketing budget produces the result. And I would have to say, I don't think that your budget has undergone really any external scrutiny as to what parts of it might be more or less effectively spent. You've obviously decided you could live with a $300,000 reduction in that budget, so you must have some sense of what things might be of higher value and what of less value. But my question really has to do with where the money comes from. That's the issue, really. And one thing that occurs to me is that yesterday we were asked to contribute $2 million to the Cranford relocation project, which, if we were to give that $2 million, would effectively be double dipping against the 4 territorials that will also be asked. So it's just really, you know, we're the 5th guy, you might as well ask us too. We have tried for years to understand what the total spend on tourism promotion is in this region, because clearly Hastings Council, Napier Council in particular, are spending millions of dollars to promote their attractions and other things related to tourism. And so from a ratepayer standpoint, it seems to me ratepayers deserve to know what is the total public investment that is being made in this industry. And our contribution is a piece of it. And I think needs to fairly be looked at in the context of what is the total spend. We've asked over and over. It would appear of late that Hastings is becoming a little more transparent about what it spends. Napier is opaque as ever. And so the ratepayer is really in the dark as to what is coming out of their pocket to support this industry. And I think that's why you see the tenor you do in a lot of the or a lot of the submissions that support the proposition we've put forward. So are you able to say what is that total investment that the public purse is making?
It's probably not quite that simple, unfortunately. The situation was and we had those discussions around this table when we started, and the concern was the regional council providing funding at the same time as the local other local authorities doing the same thing, and it becoming competing in essence. And the challenge was made to me, okay, but we want to see everyone get in behind this. That's happened. We don't now have separate campaigns going for Napier, Hastings, outside of the region. There is one regional message going outside the region. What we've seen happen is the local authorities are focusing more on their product activity and supporting those, and focusing on their own specific area, not starting to run, as they were, campaigns outside of the region where we would have a Hawke's Bay one and a Napier one and a Havelock North one. So all of that has now come in behind Hawke's Bay Tourism, and we have a consistent, cohesive external promotional plan. I think that works well. What the actual other local authorities are spending on internally, we're not privy to that, clearly.
Well, if I could use another analogy, we have taken upon ourselves to fully fund civil defense with a rate increase of 5% for the pleasure of taking that burden on. With the, of course, assurance that the territorial authorities would reduce their funding in that area commensurately, so it would be a net zero change to the ratepayer, who's at the bottom of the heap at the end of the day here. Now, of course, they won't do that. They'll just move the money around and we'll spend the money additionally. But the same could be said here. If marketing the region is really the key thing that ratepayers should be involved in, marketing the region for the maximum benefit of everybody, then if we were to put an extra million or so into Hawke's Bay tourism, one might argue we need to see some evidence that much less will be spent of ratepayer dollars on marketing various attractions and so forth. I mean, it is all coming out of the same pocket at the end of the day.
My understanding was when it was originally set up that the other local authorities did have a reduction, that they accepted that the money would go to the regional council for the development of tourism. So I think you've got the answer that you're seeking.
Tom, we need to move on. Have you got another?
Well, I mean, if there are other questions, fine. I will have other questions.
Okay. Uppy, we'll come back to you. Uppy.
Good morning. So I just want some clarity around Hawke's Bay Tourism's intent with regards to where it hopes to work more collaboratively with tangata whenua. While I recognise the comments made this morning, I also note that from my perspective, I'm participating in a growing conversation around a coordinated cultural tourism effort reaching from Mahia all the way down to the Wairarapa. And while that extends outside of this catchment area, I'm looking to Hawke's Bay Regional, Hawke's HBT around what are their strategic intentions around building partnerships right across Hawke's Bay, right across our catchment, and how that integrates across the Eastern Kahungunu corridor. Is there any conversation in that space?
The answer is yes. We've actually been keen for some time to work with tangata whenua on the overall provision of Māori cultural product. As I said before, the difficulty we have is actually having product to market. And I think as Hinawai's given you an example, it does take time, and it's not about international conferences. It's actually about sitting down and understanding what's the distribution channel, what do you need in terms of pricing, how do you actually provide product that is actually what we call visitor friendly. So there's a lot of that work that needs to be done. And one of the things I think is not helpful is to have, frankly, a separate organisation saying, look, put the funding in here. That's not how tourism works. Cultural tourism is an incredibly important part of it, but you have to develop the capability within one organisation that has the connections internationally to ensure that it's marketed properly. It's no good going offshore. We wouldn't even do that without Tourism New Zealand. They're the ones that have got the connections internationally. If we've got good quality product here, we can actually take that offshore and we can get people to book it in advance and start to and promote it. So what you're describing needs to happen, and it can only happen if we do it together. And we've been aiming to do that for some time, and we've found that very difficult.
Debbie, and then Alan and Peter.
Thank you, and good morning to all of you. I've really enjoyed your presentations, particularly tonight. One of the observations I've made in the last long-term plan was that there was a need for a Māori competency aspect in the governance of Hawke's Bay Tourism. So, for better or for worse, the council put that stipulation on your constitution, I understand. And my observation now through all of the material I've read through in our long-term plan submissions is that it has caused quite a divisive issue, and there's a lot of people that are not happy about it. So I appreciated hearing, Hinawai, your story of how you've engaged with both of the entities. I'm wondering, George, do you have a recommendation now as to the constitution, whether we've made the right decision in having one expert in this area, or, I mean, are you seeing a problem that potentially some of us are seeing, or how are we going to fix this?
I don't, certainly not a problem having someone represent on a board. It's a very good thing, and we welcome it, whether it's Mike or whoever it may be. It's certainly something I think that we want to see continue. I actually think this is an area that just needs more conversation. We've been shut out from a lot of these conversations, to be perfectly honest. And I saw the presentation yesterday. I watched it online, and I don't agree with most of that. We have made repeated attempts to say that this has to be a unified thing, and the argument is no. And I think that needs to change, and that will help.
You spoke before. I'll go to Peter first, then I'll come back to you, and then back to Tom.
Thanks, Rex. Hi, George, and thanks for all of your presentations. I'm actually really pleased that we've made this proposal to reduce the funding for Hawke's Bay Tourism, because it's actually galvanised thinking within the industry about the importance of promotion, how it's working, the functioning of Hawke's Bay tourism, and where it should stand in the future. So it's been a really helpful conversation from that perspective, and it's certainly focused people's minds on the issue. It's also my view that expecting the Regional Council to continue to fund tourism at a rate of $1.8 million and probably increasing over time is not a sustainable model to support this very important industry in Hawke's Bay. So what I want to go back and do, George, is just to have a bit of a closer look at the very early part of your presentation when you were talking about alternative forms of funding, because that's what we need to be thinking about. It's certainly made an impression upon me that a lot of people in the who are involved in the periphery of the tourism industry in this region now see the importance of promotion and want to see a continuance of it in one form or another. So the conversation for me, or the important conversation that we should be having, is what are the alternative forms of funding that we can use to substitute a reduction in the regional council's contributions. So in your proposal, in your written submission to us, there was a proposal around a differentiated rate that might be struck based upon the number of nights that homes were used for bedding visitors. What you were talking about earlier in your proposal sounded a little bit different to me, and you were talking about Airbnb. Can I just get clarity from you? When you're talking about Airbnb, were you talking about just Airbnb, or were you talking about all of the websites that advertise bed? Because it's not just Airbnb, there's Book a Batch and others. That's question one. And question two, are you proposing that there is some sort of what I would call a bed night tax, and that we would need to, for instance, get some enabling legislation? Or did you have some other form of collection in mind from your conversation with Airbnb?
Okay. Thanks, Peter. First of all, we're just using Airbnb as an example of what's called peer-to-peer properties, but there are a lot of accommodation providers, particularly, who are basically in the tourism industry and are not rated for that. We're not proposing that it be a bed tax. That requires legislation, and we think that that's just going to be too hard. We would see it as being done as part of the rating base. I think what's being looked at elsewhere at the moment is once a property goes beyond a certain number of nights in any one year, it then becomes rated as a commercial, accommodation provider.
So how is that monitored? How do we know?
Well, certainly Airbnb, you can monitor it now because the material's there, and it's a question of how you do it.
And they'll make the information available?
They'll make the information available, yeah. So, and we don't have the tools to do this here. This is something that we'd have to do in conjunction with the Regional Council. Look, we accept that we're all looking for a model here that's sustainable into the future. I think none of us want to go through this every 3 years. We'd like to think that we've got a sustainable level that we can move on. And I think we need to do that work over the next 2 to 3 years, acknowledging that in the national debate right now, it's a massive debate about how to support this tourism industry, which is going to be up near 5 million international visitors in a very near time. And how do you do that? And I think we've got to take part in that. We can't do it if we end up with an organisation that represents it for Hawke's Bay tourism, which is actually diminishing, that's all. But I believe there are going to be much more effective ways of funding tourism promotion in future that everybody feels comfortable with.
Yeah, I certainly believe that that's going to be the case, because right now we all know that there's a bunch of what we might describe as free riders, yes, who need to be prepared to pay their share.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. Alan.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just a little bit of background very briefly. I've been involved in local government since 1983, and over that period of time have either been involved in or observed various initiatives in regard to economic development and tourism promotion. And in fact, I can't recall all of the names of the organisations that have come and gone. Now, they were all set up with very, very fine intentions But in the earlier days, there was fragmentation, duplication, and as you've said before, local government units running their own promotions and that sort of thing. And it was really about 6 years ago that some coherence was brought into this activity, and the notion of collaboration was established and decided upon by everyone. At the same time, the Regional Council went out and said the only way we're going to make this work is to have a regional economic development rate. It was publicly consulted on and agreed, and there's very little opposition to it. And that now funds Hawke's Bay tourism and other activities in business development and product research and so on. And it's evolved since then into this Matariki economic development strategy. And my question is, do you see yourselves as a key component of the Matariki process? And do you consider it's important that you continue on with your efforts to ensure that the Matariki plan actually succeeds?
Yeah, I've looked at the Matariki plan, and one of there's no doubt that we want to be part of that. One of the issues with economic development activities throughout the country is that their long-term plans are very good. Their short-term plans are very hard to actually find measures, and you find what happens is it generally defaults to the tourism industry, who does have measures. We are measured monthly on our performance, and so we ultimately end up becoming a crucially important part of that economic driver, because we've got the stats on it. The business-to-business stuff is much harder to assess, but this is business-to-consumer. We have the figures, and inevitably it ends up as we play a key role in the economic development entities that operate. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, George. Alan, if I can just interrupt for a second. I think councillors, and I tried to state this at the beginning of our meeting today, if we can keep our to questions, not political statements. Not being too hard on you, Alan, but there's other of us making political statements. The argument that you have will be debated tomorrow. In this forum, we want to find out what the tourism people think. So if you could keep your thing to questions, please. I said I'd come back to Tom for one of his further questions, then to you.
Back to the money flow. The other issue, of course, is the industry contribution, and in these submissions there are quite a range of numbers given as to what that is. The highest that I've seen in one of these submissions is from a tour operator who seems to think that the industry is putting $900,000 a year in cash, not the in-kind stuff, in cash into the industry. Or into Hawke's Bay tourism, and down to the level that is in your budget, which would say membership is actually less than 100,000. So I guess the question I have is, and we've put this issue of tithing the industry into the too hard bucket in all of these conversations, just too hard to do. But you've come up with a proposal you have 623 peer-to-peer operators who you say are in the hospitality business. There's a way to get our arms around that, perhaps. What would you say, just percentage-wise, if whatever the budget is for Hawke's Bay tourism? Again, the ratepayer is looking at this in kind of gross terms. All right, well, if the public puts in X percent of this, what's the industry putting in? Should it be 20%? Should it be 30%? What do you think is a fair proportion of Hawke's Bay Tourism's budget that should, one way or the other, come from industry?
Well, that comes through the rating base, essentially.
How's that?
Well, what we're proposing in the peer-to-peer property review is that if essentially they'd have a commercial rate which would be set, and that's how they'd contribute.
I understand how that would work. I guess I'm asking a macro question here of, in whatever ways one would put your hands on it, whether it's membership fees or investment in particular events or what have you. At the end of the day, you should be able to tell us, this is the amount of money, this is the quantum that does come directly out of pockets from firms that benefit from tourism into the budget of Hawke's Bay Tourism. Is that 10% of the budget? Is it 50% of the budget? What is it?
What budget are you talking
Today,
about, Tom?
your overall $2.34 million budget.
Well, currently, of that, the budget that you provide us, we get around about 120, 150,000 through subscriptions. The rest of the money, obviously, comes from the industry through to the regional council through rating.
George, it says in Annie's paper 440,000 in cash from your membership.
Yeah, in terms of, that's also cash and also contributions made by the industry.
Yeah.
Separately.
It's in terms of what they provide. They provide it through promotion, through free rooms, et cetera, et cetera.
Just as argument's sake, we've just been to Trends and there's 10 operators gone there, spent $10,000 a head. So that's all going into that parcel as well. And there's every event that we bring international guests from overseas buyers, and they get obviously many, many nights here that are gifted by hotels, motels, and obviously tours to promote the region for the public and the ratepayers. That would be part of that.
It's a non-answer.
I think Tom's question was, the ratepayers putting up 1.8 million, going to 1.5 million, that comes from ratepayers. His question is, how much is the tourism industry putting in cash on top of that 1.5? Is that your question?
Or as part of it.
It's quite clearly in
440,000.
Annie's paper.
It's simply not true, though, that's the problem.
Cash, the question of cash.
Anyway, you can think about that. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. One of the,
That and in kind.
it's a business. We're striking a business development rate, right? So I look at that and go, there's a number of different outcomes that I want from business. So rather than be seen as being picking a winner, which is tourism, would you have any comment on if we were to make that funds that we get in from that business development rate contestable for anyone else to apply for?
For any other industry to apply for?
Any other industry to apply for?
I think that's a decision for you. I go back, this is an economic issue. You either want the growth from tourism or not. The issue here is it's unlikely to continue if it's not funded. The funding is unlikely to come from the industry, and this has been proven regionally, internationally, everywhere. The tourism industry doesn't fund Tourism New Zealand. It's funded by the government because it's a genuine understanding that you're actually promoting, while you're in tourism promotion, you're actually promoting your country and your region and all that goes with it, and you need to get that bit right. So if you believe that the 1.8 you're currently giving to tourism could be applied to by somebody else who can provide $600 million worth of economic return to the region, that would be interesting.
Sorry, okay.
Second question.
No, yep, a second question. You talk about whether we need the growth or not, so that's an interesting comment given the way that the infrastructure we have in Hawke's Bay, it seems to be struggling to cope with the three waters, especially with the discharges of, with the likes of discharge of sewage into Aharu Estuary and the likes, and what happened over in Havelock North. Which is of some concern to the council, obviously. So how many times do you think that we have to have article or function or events cancelled in the estuary or Tūtira appear in the national media for its poor water quality, or Whakaki or Whātuma or wherever? How many times do you think that has to happen before it has a detrimental effect on tourism numbers coming into Hawke's Bay?
I think it's something that we have to be very, very concerned about. I launched the 100% Pure New Zealand campaign. This is I'm passionate about it. It's not an environment or tourism, it's both. And I think tourism can play a really crucial role in what you're wanting to do in improving the environment in Hawke's Bay. Take us with you.
Can you elucidate me a bit on that, on how you think that tourism can do that?
There are all sorts of ways in which visitors can take part in environmental sustainability, and where there are opportunities for it, it's happening, whether it be tree planting or even donations or what have you. It's a question of starting to look at how we can start to get an environmental footprint within the tourism industry. We can be a partner in it, that's all I'm saying. I think it can do well. Chairman, I'm just conscious that there might be other presenters.
Yeah, no, I'm about to move that, George.
Sorry, it's your meeting.
I'm on to it. Yeah, it is my meeting, you're right. There's a lot of people, so we've given Tourism Hawke's Bay a fair run at this, and I think councillors are enjoying that, but there were a lot of people who made submissions, and that was the reason that we concised this into a larger session, but we don't want to abuse those people who have come along, such as yourself out there, and who do want your 5 minutes. So if there are those amongst you who want to do that, you need to stand up and be known now, otherwise we will carry on this debate with your representatives. So I see Lawrence has got his hand up, and the young lady, holy mackerel. So the tourism industry is standing. Now, Lawrence, you had your hand up first, and then, but remember, you've got to keep it concise.
Absolutely.
You're going to make us, it's going to be difficult, as you can see.
And I do understand it's your meeting.
I'm glad of that, Lawrence.
Well, that means you're just about to take it over.
Now, I'll say this once for everybody. So the rules are, you've got 5 minutes. You can speak for the whole 5 minutes and berate everyone, or you can speak for 3 minutes and take a couple of questions. It's your decision. Lawrence, I'm going to press the button any minute. Well, my young lady.
It went about 3 minutes ago.
Thanks for your time, Lawrence. Some things never change.
And before I press the button, Lawrence, I want to thank you for coming. I know you were in Wellington this morning because you rang me on another matter. We greatly appreciate that you take the time out, and presume you're going back this afternoon, or you're staying?
12 o'clock, yep.
Oh, 12 o'clock, better get you done then. Okay.
Thank you, Mr Chairman, and thank you, councillors. Look, first of all, the Facing Our Futures document, I think, is very well put out, and I actually support all the measures you're taking, particularly the move into the environmental space. But I have particularly come here to talk about the tourism aspect. Only because, like Alan Dick has just said, I have some historical perspective on where we've come from and where we are today. We have a $663 million industry in Hawke's Bay at the moment, and there's every chance it'll grow to a $1 billion industry. And while that is good for the economy and jobs and economic growth, it also actually fundamentally adds to the vibrancy of this community. Every person that lives here wants to be in a place that's attractive to outsiders, wants to be proud of bringing friends and family and visitors here. And we're in that space. And that is of some value, in my view, to the community. So, as I simply put it, we have all the councils on board with this model. We have a unified industry supporting this model and the work of Annie and George and their team. History does not look favourably on us if you go back at the number of iterations we've tried to do this. The KPIs have all been met by Hawke's Bay Tourism, or majority of them, as I understand it. So you cannot criticise what Hawke's Bay Tourism's doing. It's united in front of its industry and supported by its industry. And we are still, though, at the bottom end of funding per rateable property that goes in from the public purse into what tourism does. Now, we have some challenges, and as I've met with tourism industries people throughout this process, I've simply said the current funding model is not fair. Okay? The industry, through whatever mechanism, needs to take up a bigger share of the funding cost for Hawke's Bay Tourism as the principal beneficiaries. And I've learnt that from years, that's my objective opinion, from years in local government. So how do you get to a new system? And the model that's been suggested today is go to a 50-50 split. And I put everything against how my mum gets affected. My 85-year-old mum, what is a realistic share that she should pay towards something like this? And I think the 50-50 split is a good starting point. Probably in the long term, I think it could go to 70-30 industry, 30% public good. I also know that peer-to-peer accommodation is actually being worked on as we speak. And I also know in my Wellington role that IRD is fundamentally looking at peer-to-peer lending. So there is going to be a regulatory and peer-to-peer accommodation. There is going to be a regulatory approach, because Inland Revenue is equally concerned of their share of the tax rate that is coming out of peer-to-peer accommodation and whether that's fair or not. Don't get me wrong, this is not an easy thing to do. And in the Corrie Lounge in Wellington this morning, I spoke to a lawyer who's involved in the Auckland changes. That's going to be fought every way through the process, and that is coming from the industry who think that actually they're now going to pay too much in the Auckland case. So I think what we need to think about in this region is if we want to make this change, and I think everybody in this room is agreeing that a change needs to be made in the proportionality of funding or mechanisms. And when I was the mayor, and at the time wasn't that well received, but I still maintain it, if we went to a bed tax, as an example, and everybody paid $1, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. It would largely be funding. But we don't have a mechanism to be able to do that without a legislative change, and we live in an imperfect world. So at the moment, we have a booming industry, we have a united industry, we have all the councils that are happy. We just need to tweak the funding arrangements, in my view. And the recommendation that have been put up by George and the team today, I support. I would actually prefer in myself that you left it at 1.8 million rather than taking the 300,000 out, because I think the upside for the industry and for the region is immense, but you need to constantly look at the funding mechanism. And over time, you need to transition to a new model. Whether that is the government brings some enabling legislation to allow bed taxes or not, I don't know, but I think that's something that is under active consideration. And in the meantime, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Lawrence. You used your entire time, except for 22 seconds, which is not enough for either my councillor or yourself. So thank you very much. We will. The next person was the young lady stood up. I'm not sure how we're going to do this. We might need a queue. Alex, do you want to say something?
I'll wait longer in the queue.
You'll wait in the queue? Okay. So welcome.
Right, the young lady is Katie Nimmin from Nimmin & Sons.
Hi, Katie.
I want to speak to a few things, but most importantly, it's cause and effect. Our business is 113 years old, and I'm the 5th generation, and I'm currently running the company under my father. And businesses don't survive that long if they don't give back to the community and look after the environment that they belong to. So the first thing and the most important thing is that we have nothing to do if people don't come to the region. Only so much of our business comes from who lives here. And that's great. You know, we look after the schools, we look after sporting groups, we look after community groups. But if we didn't have cruise ship passengers, if we didn't have conferences, if we didn't have people coming for weddings from out of town, all things that Hawke's Bay Tourism promote and bring to Hawke's Bay, we wouldn't be able to look after the environment, we wouldn't be able to increase the wages of our staff members, and we wouldn't be able to keep thriving on another 113 years. The most important thing is that Hawke's Bay Tourism, with the increase of funding that they've had and where they are now, is being able to promote the shoulder season. And that shoulder season is seeing us being busy now still. We can keep our staff on all year round, and we've never been able to do that. We're still looking for more staff if anyone wants to drive. Good. So we're really busy now, and that's fantastic, and that has not been the case until the last year and a half, the effort that Hawke's Bay Tourism is putting in. So one little thing I want to read, which is actually from an article that a new driver actually wrote about my grandfather. And this is the words of my grandfather. He has many other interests outside of the transport industry, including a passion for environment issues. He is chairman of the newly formed Land Care Foundation, which aims to promote conservation in the community. He's also a director of the local power authority. He says, I make sure I enjoy the things I'm doing. If I didn't enjoy it, I'd switch to something else. And we look at that today, and Hiniwai, I don't know whether she mentioned it, but a really big pat on the back for her and ourselves. We're one of the only or very few businesses to achieve a Qualmark Gold, which is spearheaded by Tourism New Zealand and Art Deco Trust as well. Spearheaded by Tourism New Zealand, which actually encourages businesses to put more money and more effort into environmental sustainability as well as customer service and looking after its employees for overall well-being. We're one of only 2 coach companies in the country to achieve Qualmark Gold. We're offsetting our emissions, we're planting native trees, and we're supporting other businesses like Napier Māori Tours to get them off the ground and to actually take people and contribute to the Hawke's Bay community and the environment. We just couldn't do that without the support of Hawke's Bay Tourism to bring all year round visitors to keep us busy, to be able to pay our employees more, to be able to pay more into environmental sustainability. It costs money, but it's an and. It's not in tourism or environment, it's tourism and environment. And we can do more with the help of Hawke's Bay Tourism.
Very good. Thank you, Katie. Well, we do have time for one question for Katie. Obviously intimidated them.
She has. Not she has, Chair. Who's going to follow that?
Thank you, Katie. Actually, that format was very good. Katie came up and introduced herself, so if the next person could just come up and introduce themselves. Don't be shy.
One over here.
Oh, come on. Up you come. You're bringing your conciliari as well, are you?
Yeah. Should we share the chair?
There you go.
Hi, I'm Steph Kennard from Napier City Business, formerly Inner City Marketing, and we're the Napier City CBD Business Association. And I've got Steve here from Adore Collections, one of our retailers, and we're here to represent the 450 members we have in a very small geographical boundary of the CBD, and we have over 2,000 staff working in that environment as well. And Steve's here on behalf of the members and as a retailer to talk to you about the impact that tourism has within our small area.
Actually, I have to tell you, I'm a bit nervous, not because of the intimidating crew that I'm talking to, or the 450 businesses that we represent, or the 2,000 staff that are employed, but by the 4-year-old little girl of the young lady who made my coffee this morning, who said, "Don't let my mum lose her job." And it's like there is a feeling out there in the marketplace, because I had visits over the last few days when people found out that I was talking for them, that our jobs are at risk, our businesses are at risk. People are concerned that we don't understand the impact that the cruise ships make on the employment and the van driver that brings our goods and all the pieces that are associated with that industry. As a new person moving in, having relocated my business here, I'm absolutely flabbergasted that we would even be considering affecting the funding of a organisation that has excelled and is nationally recognised as excelling at bringing people to a region that doesn't have a major attraction. The business infrastructure that is being built up here is just an applaud to Annie. As a business moving in, I know Annie's name. I know she's head of tourism, because her influence through the team goes through. We know what's expected of us to deliver an experience to the people coming in, to make sure that we take the money so that we can pay them wages, so that we can do the affordable wage thing, so that we can employ them, so they've got jobs. However, having said all that, I don't recommend that you keep the funding going on an open-ended basis, because at this stage of the life cycle, we should be looking at ways that we can fund the industry. Now, I've got lots of examples where there have been levies placed on industries, and those with the money, their self-interest in take over the proposal, and it's the advantages to the region are lost. Whitsundays, great case study. I recommend that to achieve the $1 billion growth that keeps us employed, that keeps us being able to feed our families, that keeps us being able to add to the community and enrich our community, I propose that we leave, for the next 3 years, because of where we're at in the life cycle, we leave the funding the same, but that we put the body together of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, of the tourism industry, of the people in the industry, both directly and indirectly affected, to look at those funding models and how we do it. Don't do it with levies. Believe me, don't do it with levies. It's a recipe for disaster. And I have some in-depth analysis here, which I'd like to circulate and share with you. Happy to take questions. There is a lot of information here, but I don't want to repeat.
We do have time for one question. Neil?
One quick question.
Neil.
Great to hear your representation of 450 businesses in Napier, is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you tell me how much cash those 450 businesses contribute to Hawke's Bay tourism each year?
Apart from the rates, of course, and the fact that we're here.
How much money out of your pocket goes into Hawke's Bay
This is
tourism?
interesting. In our discussions with Annie and understanding we're a new business, so I can only talk for me at this moment.
Does your colleague know, or?
So perhaps if I can answer the question though. It is an evolving thing where the businesses need to understand what their responsibilities are within the Hawke's Bay Tourism. Remember, the results that Hawke's Bay Tourism have achieved are significant, and we're at the beginning of the upswing.
Wasn't my question.
So we say, what do we need to do to add value to that?
Now, what are you doing? What cash are you putting in now?
Our membership's made up of a whole lot of different industries, and we've 15% hospitality, we've got 50% retail.
Sure.
We have tourism within the CBD, so each component of that is operating separately. So as a membership, I can't tell you exactly what dollar value they're contributing, but they will be contributing because of who they are.
If they put $100 in, that'd be 45,000, wouldn't it?
Yes, exactly right.
Well, that just proved that Neil knows his maths. That's the end of that session. Thank you very much, Steve. And Steve, was it? Steve, was it? Steph and Steve?
Steve,
Steph and Steve, yeah.
Steph and Steve.
Steph and Steve show.
It was a Steph and Steve show. So thank you very much. We really appreciate that. Do we have somebody else coming forward? Oh, yes, we'll take you. I'll just have to-
I'm
welcome.
Margaret Gwynn, and I live here, so I'm simply speaking as a resident. I support the cut in funding, the reduction in funding for Hawke's Bay Tourism. I think it's being done carefully and considerately, and it gives them time and a bit of a prod to look for other sources of funding. I don't see tourism as a core concern for the Regional Council. I want the council to look at land and water and work with agriculture and horticulture and look at the impacts of climate change. These are the things I want the Regional Council to do. I also want to say that I think as a country we need to have a conversation about how many tourists is actually a good idea. This should not be a never-ending growth industry, tourism. I think we are already running the risk of damaging the experience they come here to enjoy. I live here, I enjoy Art Deco weekend, but over the last couple of years, I've decided not to go to a lot of free events because there are too many people. You cannot see, you cannot hear. It's spoiling the experience. And I do think we need to consider limiting the number of tourists coming into the country. And that's all I wish to say to you.
Stop, through the Deputy Chair.
I've got the chair in the room.
Oh, I've got the chair.
Question to Councillor Bailey.
Thank you for that, Margaret. Do you think there's an opportunity if we were to use the business development rate to promote a business which was focused on environmental outcomes, for example, electronics recycling or something like that?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand that.
Well, at the moment we're levying a business development rate, which is currently all going towards, essentially all going towards Hawke's Bay tourism.
Right.
If we were to use that as alternatively to say support a electronics recycling company.
Excellent, excellent. Would much prefer that. Yes. I mean, what do I want to say? I really applaud the direction of the long-term plan. I fully support the direction of it, and that includes reducing the funding for tourism.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions for Margaret? Thank you very much, Margaret. We can just get in the queue. Oh, we have two.
Great, my name's Fiona Rawlings. I have a small bed and breakfast called Kerry Lodge. I'm also here with the Bed and Breakfast Association of New Zealand and the president here, Rayma Jenkins. I just want to talk specifically a little bit about bed and breakfast because we are a little bit unique in terms of tourist funding and what we need. Bed and breakfast guests are made up of 83% in the Hawke's Bay region, 83% of international visitors. As small businesses, one-person businesses, we are just completely unable to market to attract those visitors to our region. We rely on Tourism New Zealand to bring tourists to New Zealand, and then Hawke's Bay Regional Tourism to bring them to Hawke's Bay. The money from international visitors is completely new to the economy, and international visitors, the latest spend per person is $197 per day, so it's slightly up from domestic visitors as well. So international visitors are contributing a lot more to the economy. I've got lots of notes here, but most of the points have already been covered by other speakers. Our concern, my business, I will just say, my business has increased, been going 7 years now, and it's increased 161% over that time. And in the last 2 years, it's increased with the funding and spend by Hawke's Bay Tourism by probably half that, at least. So, any questions?
Oh, Rachel, I would just like to really emphasise that we are an industry that brings spenders into the area. The spending, the supermarkets, the petrol stations, the dairies, as well as hospitality, as well as our activities. And as a small business, we have been here for 16 years. I employ a small cleaning company. I use, have my laundry done. I have, because I have a business, an accountant. I have, because we need a proper insurance to run our business, I have a insurance broker. And of course, obviously, occasionally the solicitor gets involved. So it is money that goes everywhere. It's not just the tourism contributors. And as small businesses, home-based businesses, and as the president of the Bed and Breakfast Association, we understand how difficult this funding issue is. But just to ask accommodation to be the ones to fund is not fair. It has to be everybody who is benefiting from that. And that's why we see that our model here in Hawke's Bay is very special, because we have an organisation that can contribute from everybody who is being impacted by the benefits of tourism. The Queenstown model has been brought up. Queenstown do have a targeted rate for every business that is run from home, not just accommodation. That we see is the perfect solution, but it has to be everybody. Why should the accommodation provider be the one who is footing the bill when we have a huge capital investment in our properties? We have insurances and rates that are quite high, well, higher than Auckland rates here in Hawke's Bay, in Napier. And then another little operator, tourism operator, who is not based on a property, gets the same benefits as us, but is not going to face extra costs. So please, you have a great model here. Of course we support the environment. I was called Mark Silver. We contribute to the Pampak Kiwi Crash every year through work I do at the B&B for our guests. Please, we need both. It's not one or the other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You didn't quite use your whole time, but we don't have enough time for questions, unfortunately. So, Fiona and Rayma, is that right? Rayma, thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, 2 questions.
I have one as well.
Don't have enough time.
I wasn't going to interrogate them, just two simple questions.
I'm not sure about that. Look at that look on his face.
Shock and horror.
Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Susan McDade. I'm the General Manager of the Hastings City Business Association. Now, Hastings City and my area is quite similar in the size that we also have about 440 businesses as members. We are not considered the heart of tourism in Hawke's Bay by any means. We do have tourism operators, as you would, depending on what the definition is that you're actually using as operators. We've been working really closely for the last 3 years with Hawke's Bay Tourism, not just around tourism, but around the brand image of Hastings CBD and how that's portrayed as part of the Hawke's Bay story outside of our region. Our number one issue is around branding. So I don't actually see this so much as a tourism argument for or against who pays. This is about a marketing exercise, selling the product that is Hawke's Bay, not just for tourists, but for attracting young people here, industry, businesses. A lot of the information that we are talking to with people who are thankfully quite interested in Hastings at the moment is around that story that we have helped to collate with Hawke's Bay Tourism. If we're all working together in this way, we can sell the product that's Hawke's Bay in a much wider way. Now, I agree that you probably need to look at these funding issues, and I find that this is really common with councils right across the board, is that, you know, handbrake, pull the funding, and then figure it out. Why don't you look at those next 3 years, look at a transitional model, do not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let the progress continue and work in a transitional team, work with Hawke's Bay Tourism to get the result that everybody's happy with. But just stopping it and slowly cutting it back until you figure out the right sort of model and get the other councils to kind of come to the party is probably not going to work. And I know it's been said many times, where do you draw the line at what the tourism industry is? It is one of those industries that is very difficult to ring fence, and it goes and spiders out unless you go with a straight commercial levy, because it does affect so many businesses. And you think back, how do you attract new staff to this region? You make it sexy, cool, attractive. We have an entire development on the east side of Hastings, which used to be someplace you wouldn't want to hang out, and now is the coolest part of Hawke's Bay. That entire development is based on the fact that we want to draw people there to see our artisan producers, to see the mini Cuba Street vibe, festivals, events, hospitality, and all that cannot be built unless it's an attractive offer for our locals, but tourists as well. So I just think you should really think hard about this decision and maybe look to a win-win situation instead of just ending it.
Thank you, Susan. We do have a time for a question. Rick, are you on? Or? Oh, sure.
Susan, are you aware that the issue of funding has been raised with the tourism people on a number of occasions by this council, and on every occasion we've been told it's just too hard? So how long do we have of just too hard until we have the hard conversation?
I think that actually you have the power here in this room to stipulate. I was here 3 years ago, and I submitted on behalf of, for this same thing, for their funding increase. And I did state that we wanted more for Hastings. And it's not always easy to get that. But I'm just saying, look at the benefits and look at the positives and then work around that. There's a lot of smart people in this room. I'm sure that you guys can work together and figure out a solution.
But with respect, you didn't answer my question. Okay.
I'm not a counsellor.
No, it's a straightforward counsel.
We have one more quick question. Neil's a quick one?
Yes, a very quick one. You represent, what, 440?
440 businesses,
Do you
yes.
know how much they pay in cash to
Hawke's Bay Tourism?
You don't
No,
know that?
that's an impossible figure to know. Half of them are landowners and half of them are direct businesses. There's a wide variety of them, so no, I don't have those figures.
It's just a pattern here that no one seems to know how much money they're handing over, and nor does Hawke's Bay Tourism know. All we've got is a figure under 100,000 in cash given by the sector, wine growers, your group, and Hastings, etc. So from my perspective, speaking on behalf of Lawrence Yule's 85-year-old grandmother who's being asked to contribute.
Yeah.
I'd like to know how much people are putting in.
You can't answer that question. What was another political
It'll be
statement?
less than Napier. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Susan. Really appreciate your comments. Next. Oh, this lady here has been trying to get up, so. And then Alex, I'm putting you in the queue. Oh, okay, and then you, right?
Thank you. My name's Marilyn Scott and I'm a ratepayer and a citizen of the area. I put in a written submission. I suppose I first of all want to start by thanking Hawke's Bay Tourism and the small businesses and many businesses that bring such vibrancy to our area, because we all benefit from that, that is for sure. I suppose what I feel, if I might be so bold as to say, is that I actually want to speak for the environment, because we as human beings do a lot to our environment and they don't get an opportunity to speak back in a council forum. I am concerned that the Hawke's Bay Regional Council's priority, like Margaret Gwynn said, should be spent on the rivers which have been degraded over many decades through neglect and through human neglect, which we've all contributed through. I'm concerned about drinkable water. I'm concerned about the environment which we value so much and which tourists come here to see. And while business is important, while tourism is vital, while human beings thrive on culture, I feel concerned that it's about priorities. And for me, and I believe I speak for many ordinary ratepayers in Hawke's Bay, the priority is to look at the degraded waterways, the rivers, the natural environment, which is so easily voiceless in our society. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Marilyn. Councillors may have questions for you. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I'll put the same question to you, Marilyn, that I put to Margaret, which was if we were to look at putting our business development rate to a particular business that, for example, recycle electronic or whiteware or whatever electronics, would you think that's also a good use of a business development rate?
Yes, I would, but of course that's my bias, obviously. I suppose what I think the council has to be careful about is that, and this is where I feel Hawke's Bay Tourism is expecting council funding for businesses which I accept bring a lot of spending to this region, but a lot of that spending goes into the pockets of the businesses who are providing it. It doesn't necessarily go into the environment. I really applaud Katie Nimmin and some of the others who've spoken about what they are doing, and I think that is wonderful. And the more we can get that partnership and that model going, the better. But I think we've got to be really careful that it doesn't go into industry stuff, and I'm sure the council will sort that out. But I think the priority has to be, I mean, I've always thought that the tax that we pay, or the levy we pay to the council, is primarily for a Hawke's Bay Regional Council, is to the environment.
Alan, you got a quick question?
Yes, I just, thanks for your submission. Do you appreciate that this is a regional council and therefore its responsibility is to do things that are necessary and effective across the whole of the region? And actually, in terms of statutory obligation, yes, it's responsible for Resource Management Act responsibilities. It's responsible for biosecurity. It's responsible for transport planning and public transport, and civil defence and so on. So it's not a unipolar function.
No, I respect that, but I think the city councils also contribute significantly to those things as well. And
they're responsible for the built
yeah.
environment.
So I'm not wanting it to be an either or. I have heard the Hawke's Bay Tourism say, but I think, it's about probably priorities, really. There's never unlimited growth, and I think that point also needs to be made, and I think someone else has said it, that if we have unlimited tourism, we know our country's struggling with that, as our regions are, and much and all as we want more and more growth in our community, it can't be at the expense of our natural resources.
Thank you, Marilyn, for our time. We really appreciate your thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that's lady. Okay, you've got your 5 minutes. Hello.
We are a scruffy crew that are here to represent the hospitality industry. My name is Kim Davis.
I'm James Beck from Astronomy in Napier.
There's a lot of points that we could argue and support with Hawke's Bay Tourism, which is obviously an integral part of the hospitality industry. However, I think it's really important and evident with the questions that have happened so far that a few points need to be reiterated and stressed. One being that the amount of hospitality businesses that are throughout Hawke's Bay are a labor of love. It's a high cost, low revenue industry, which everyone knows. And so it's incredibly dependent on great brand promotion, regional tourism, in addition to the locals. It's impossible for the amount of locals in small Hawke's Bay to consistently sustain the amount of hospitality businesses that are around. And I would argue that every single person benefits from hospitality industries. Everyone goes out for a drink. Everyone goes out for a cup of coffee. Everyone goes out to eat. Everyone gets to enjoy what the hospitality industry brings to the region. And in addition to jobs, in addition to services, all those things that I've mentioned before, it definitely makes the environment and the region a better place to be. When I know the question seems to be how much cash has been contributed to Hawke's Bay Tourism and the tourism industry in general. It would be impossible to get that figure now. It wouldn't be impossible to get it going forward, however.
Well, I'm actually glad to say I can say what I contribute. And anyone else who's a member of Hawke's Bay Tourism as a hospitality industry will contribute the same. We contribute $100 a year at the moment. That's actually come down. I'm not quite sure why. And we contribute $550 every time we become part of the Fork events, which I think has been a great event for Hawke's Bay. I see hospitality is just one of the huge number of parts of tourism, and that's obviously why it's, I guess, a struggle to work out who should pay what. And I'm certainly personally not opposed to paying more, but I do think that that just stopping the funding, as seems to be what's being discussed, is going to, well, not stopping, remarkably cutting in quite a bit the funding, is as people are going to say, you're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think it sounds like we all need to work out how we can make this thing work, but if we just do slow things down, we're just going to lose out to all the other operators around the country who are not cutting their funding.
The hospitality industry definitely contributes in a lot of ways, and the reason we can't give you that solid number is because it is through beverages, it is through wine, it is through hotel rooms, it is through services, it's through tours that are donated. All of those things, I guarantee every single one of the businesses could put a dollar value to it, but they don't. They just contribute, they volunteer, they donate, they try to do everything within their means to do that. So like James said, the hospitality industry is not opposed to contributing as much as those individual businesses can. We are just saying that it is crucial that the Hawke's Bay tourism industry continues to evolve and grow and have the funding it currently has, because without it, there's no doubt that it would be impossible for the amount of hospitality businesses that are currently in operation to continue. They simply would have to shut down, a lot of them. They're small businesses that the amount of population that Hawke's Bay has cannot sustain without tourism.
Thank you, guys. We have time for one question. Is there a riveting? Paul.
Oh, sorry, Chair. Not a question, but a very quick statement. James, just like to say thank you for Astronomy for signing up the Living Wage Initiative. Much appreciated. I recognise that.
Oh, you're welcome. And I guess my point of view is we need to make money to survive, but we're also trying to run a good business. And I guess the more of us that try and do that, we're not going to be in this situation so much, I hope.
Yeah. That's right. You make it a challenge for me, so that's all good.
Thank you very much, Kim and James. You did very well. Who do we have there? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Hi everybody, I'm Sally Jackson and I am the new General Manager of the Hawke's Bay A&P Society. The reason why I've submitted today was just to remind everybody that a drop in the funding will not just impact the tourism industry, but it will impact other industries such as the primary sector industry, which is what I'm now involved in. So over the last 150 years, the Hawke's Bay A&P Society has promoted agriculture, pastoral horticulture, viticulture and forestry resources through all of our different channels, including organised events such as the Royal Show, the National Horticultural Field Day, the Wine Awards that we organise, the Primary Sector Awards and of course the most recent Farmer of the Year Award. We're located in the beautiful Showgrounds Tomoana. The facilities on site operate as an events facility and they're hired out for local and national events. We're home to the largest and most and oldest farmers market. And of course we're home to the international event Land Rover Horse of the Year. Our organisation is all about advancing the primary sector. Honouring our heritage and continuing our legacy. The Hawke's Bay A&P Society is paving the way for initiative and forward thinking in the rural sector. In the tourism sector, the tourism industry and the primary sector, as I say, are intrinsically linked. One is negatively impacted, the flow-on effect, the primary sector, will be realised. So the multiplier effect, which shows how the tourism dollar is circulated around the community, basically showing how many times that money is spent. In the simplest forms, if you just imagine a tourist coming into Hawke's Bay, and Hawke's Bay tourism has attracted that tourist to us. They spend money in hotels, and we've talked about that today. We've talked about how they've spent money in cafes and restaurants and enjoying what we've got here in Hawke's Bay. But it also creates jobs elsewhere in the economy. That hotel, for example, has to buy meat. It has to buy fruit and vegetables. So they're buying that from local farmers because we're pretty good in Hawke's Bay and we do support local. So they're buying it from local farmers. That farmer is then able to invest across the industries and is able to keep that economy going. Fertiliser, tractors, animals, all of those demands are met by our local economy. So the demand for local product increases as tourists often buy souvenirs, they visit farms, they visit the orchards, they certainly visit us at the farmers market each Sunday. So that increases secondary employment. That multiplier effect that lots of us have talked about today continues through the community and through the country, not just in Hawke's Bay. So case studies, and you've heard this a lot, case studies that show when a region does not have the budget to spend on destinational marketing and promotion, visitor numbers drop to that specific region. Market share diminishes and visitors simply select other destinations that are top of mind and have high visibility and market relevance, and that's where they go to stay. What's important to us at the Hawke's Bay A&P Society is that you understand that reducing the funding levels of Hawke's Bay tourism will result in a negative impact, not just to the tourism industry, but to the hundreds of businesses found within the primary sector. In conclusion, we embrace the excellent programs initiated by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council around the environment, and we work very closely with your staff and with your teams on those. But we do believe the proposed reduction in funding will be detrimental to many. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sally. We're not going to take any questions because we have 20 minutes left, and we don't have enough time to extend your question time, but
thank you.
We valued your presentation. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So from the audience, you need to realise that we have got 20 minutes left, and we've given a significant amount of time to this issue, and probably I could have some grumpy councillors on my hands on the amount of time we've... Oh no, I'm getting some grumbles already.
No,
never. So we've got 20 minutes. You need to use it wisely. Who is going to use those 20 minutes? Oh, she's up. I knew that would get her up.
We'll
Alex,
have Alec Anita, that'll work.
you've got 5 minutes like everybody else. And we're expecting some wisdom.
Kia ora tātou again. Lovely to be here again. Thank you for having me. I'm sitting here today with 2 hats on. I've been part of 2 submissions. One is on behalf of the Central Hawke's Bay District Council, and firstly I want to speak on my submission on behalf of the mayors of the region. And this conversation is about Brand Hawke's Bay. That's what it is. Brand Hawke's Bay, and the work that Hawke's Bay Tourism does is the face that this region puts out to the world, and the support of the face that people who come here, the experience that they have. So we as local people know where to find the friendliest guy who makes the coffee in the morning, but actually Hawke's Bay Tourism work is about how to enable those businesses, bring the visitors, but enable those businesses to provide the authentic Hawke's Bay experience about why we know we love Hawke's Bay. We want our visitors to love it too. So this is Brand Hawke's Bay. In the past, there has been attempts by individual territorial authorities in this space and in doing a variety of things. But the reality is, although each of our territorial authorities exist in the region of Hawke's Bay, we have our own responsibilities when it comes to Brand Hastings, Brand Central Hawke's Bay, Brand Napier, or Brand Wairoa. And in fact, our responsibilities are a lot around product offering and the infrastructure required to support those businesses to provide those experiences to tourists and to our communities. And it's also not just about tourists either. I can speak from specific initiatives where the support of Hawke's Bay Tourism is enabling our community outcomes and social cohesion. The Spring Fling event, which has been promoted by Hawke's Bay Tourism, a shoulder event which has been very successful in Central Hawke's Bay, has engaged our local tangata whenua, the marae in Porongahau, who host an event giving authentic rural cultural experience for visitors in Porongahau to stay the night on their marae and learn things from the local people in a very authentic way. People love that about Hawke's Bay. That is community outcome and social cohesion. That is not about that marae making big tourism bucks. It is about the authentic Hawke's Bay experience. So this is why collectively as mayors, we acknowledge our role in funding and supporting business and tourism and the brand of our individual areas, but also that Brand Hawke's Bay, who better to be the champion of Brand Hawke's Bay than the council that has the Hawke's Bay in its name, Hawke's Bay Regional Council, on our behalf as our face to the world. And this is the value on Brand Hawke's Bay. We're talking about $1.8 million each year. Is that the value we put on Brand Hawke's Bay that we put out to the world? And I believe it should be at least that. Personally, from Central Hawke's Bay's perspective, we contribute $70,000 a year to Hawke's Bay Tourism individually from our council. What that has done is access for a very small population in Hawke's Bay, access the scale and the expertise and the cohesive marketing strategy which has allowed the tourism industry, the tourism economy in our district to begin to grow. We're in a beginning phase. And that $70,000 that we're spending with Hawke's Bay Tourism, if we were doing it without Hawke's Bay Tourism, we may as well not be doing it. These are small businesses with a small foothold on the land. We have the Taniwha Daffodil Farm, which they don't even make a profit out of that. That's all about community fundraising, but visitors flock there to come and experience Hawke's Bay. We have Mangarara Eco Lodge, where they're planting hundreds of thousands of trees and plants, having an authentic experience there with the support of Central Hawke's Bay, working directly with Hawke's Bay Tourism. It is offering incredible value to all of the people of Central Hawke's Bay, and I believe the whole region.
Thank you, Alex.
Still no questions.
We actually have time for one question, Peter. You haven't had a lot, so
Thank you.
we're going to make
Alex,
time.
Welcome for the second day in a row. My question to you is, if this council makes a decision to reduce the funding from 1.8 to 1.5, as one of the representatives of the 4 TLAs in this district, would your council be prepared to contribute to that to make up that shortfall?
I think that would be a step backwards. We've been there before and it's been unsuccessful. That would be a step backwards in our eyes.
So that's a no.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Alex. You were as dynamic as ever.
Getting grumpy, councillor.
And I don't mind having a few grumpy councillors as long as you're not grumpy at me. Now, Peter, yes, you're at the back and you've been dying to speak, so come on up, mate.
Rex, I'm very much with you in the chair, so I won't be too long.
We have 15 minutes left and you got 5 of them.
Well, it sounds like a penalty, really. If you finish early, you get all the questions. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the time and effort that's gone into the preparation of this plan. And I think another bouquet needs to go out for the way it's been socialised in the broader community. I think a lot of people have had an opportunity to comment and discuss. And I've also had the opportunity this morning of listening to some profound and very provocative thought processes. And they come back to me, it's about balance. The argument here is not balanced. If we take a look at the rivers, and my credentials are very clear as Chief Executive of Mission Estate, we've been under an environmental management standard since 1999. We care deeply about our environment.
Mr. Chair, could he identify himself?
Yeah, so sorry for that. It's Peter Holly. I'm Chief Executive at Mission Estate Winery. Excellent. Thank you. You know, and if you had a look at the water argument, which is very topical at the moment, if we allowed the water conservation order to go through in its current form, we wouldn't be able to grow grapes on the Gimmick Gravels. So there's a cost around purification and better quality around our water. It comes at an economic cost. Surely we can use the water resource to better effect to create economic balance as well as cleaner waters. And this argument around the table today, I sometimes reflect on it as not being a conversation. In the truest definition of Oxford in the mid-1100th century, conversations are around listening to different points of views, and it's around synthesising that to the best point that we can arrive at. And for me, it's really around tourism. We don't have an edge on tourism. What is our edge? This is not a place that people would flock to see a natural feature. It's not a place they'd come for a unique experience. The train stops at the station here and it turns around and goes back to where it came from. We need to have products that can attract people, that can create diversity around our economy, and that can provide balance around the environment and around the economics. It's absolutely critical that we factor that into our thinking. We need to develop products, and this is what Hawke's Bay Tourism has been so effective in doing. George, you and your team have done a fantastic job for us in the last few years, and that is measured by the number of people that are coming into the region. Take an index of what we were and where we are now and the money that's flowing in. It's absolutely, it's astounding really, given the quality and quantity of what we're offering at the moment. We need to promote this further. It needs more investment, more thought, and more thought leadership to make this happen around the table. And we've asked the question, why Hawke's Bay Regional Council? And the simple answer is, because Hawke's Bay Regional Council can. The last time I looked, there was a reserve, and you might correct me, Mr. Palmer, a surplus of $70 million languishing on a balance sheet somewhere. That's
Languishing?
not... Yeah. Sorry, pardon me. Unless it's designated for a biosecurity incursion, or unless it's designated for tsunami or disaster recovery or something, that money is not being used appropriately. And we have to take the remit further to say that this is not a company that is predicated on profit and dividend. It's a public benefit entity that's been voted to sit around this table in the interests of the broader community. And this is where we come back to the economics of where we are. We've spoken about contribution by the industry, Councillor Curtin, and I share that view. You know, where's the skin in the game? Well, I can tell you that 4 years ago I did a calculation and Mission spent $18,000 in 1 year hosting inbound families. And that's free wine tourism, it's free dinners, it's all about promoting the industry and the products that we have. It's clearly in our own self-interest, but it's also in the broader interest of the Hawke's Bay community. So we have to look at this in terms of the broader strategy and what is the timing. If we need to think like business people, when your factory's starting to sell a lot of widgets, is that when you don't put more capital in? Is that when you say, well, we're not going to invest anymore, we're going to let it run out of puff? At what point in time does this revolving door in Hawke's Bay stop revolving and we open and close, open and close, open and close, we shut it down and we lose that momentum every time? And I urge this council to think about that, because what we haven't identified is the timing and the value proposition. Our value proposition around tourism is only just starting to get ahead of steam, and the timing is now. The whole of New Zealand is going ballistic around tourism, to the point that the representative or board and I saw on another company, we're investing more and more money in terms of national tourism. We need to connect with that. We need to make sure that people turn left at Taupo. It's absolutely critical we do that. And I think we can do that in a number of ways. And I've heard the Maotonga and the arguments around that. We're very well placed to be able to do a cultural tourism.
You've had your 5, mate.
If, last wrapping up comment.
Wrap it up. But you might limit somebody else, that's all.
No. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you, Councillor Graham.
Thank you very much, Peter. What I want to do now is I want to take one more person from the audience, not the audience, but the participants who are sitting in the hall, and then I'd like George to wrap it up the last 5 minutes. Are you happy with that, George? So who do you nominate? Oh, Lawrence, another go. You're going. Okay.
Enjoy your delivery.
Mark was the first one to stand up, so he got it.
Just a phone call from his grandmother who says she's unhappy about him spending her money. Another go.
Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Rex.
Need to make this good, mate. You're the second to last.
Well, I don't know about good, but I'll make it short so you may be able to fit both in. Mark Aspden from Sport Hawke's Bay. I'm going to make a point that's completely different to any of the very good points that have already been made so far. We don't have an interest in tourism at Sport Hawke's Bay. I don't mean we're against it, but it's not part of our kaupapa. Our aim is to get a healthier Hawke's Bay by encouraging our residents to be more physically active. Now, how does that relate to our discussion today? Well, I think I'll use the Hawke's Bay Marathon as an example because it's relatively front of mind, and I'm still feeling the pain from it actually. So
I saw that pain.
That's right. So I think over the last 3 years, roughly 5,000 people have entered that event. And roughly 3/4 from outside the region, which means 1/4 from inside the region. So at Sport Hawke's Bay, we actually don't care too much about 3/4 that come from outside the region. In fact, they make our stats look worse because if they're getting fitter, we look relatively less fit. But the 1/4 that are left, the 1,200 or 1,000 of Hawke's Bay residents who are doing that event, some of them, a lot of them, won't be doing any other event. They won't be doing a lot of other exercise. You see a lot of the people out there training for that be it 10Ks, 21Ks. So I think this isn't a compelling point on its own, but I'm very mindful of the fact that each extra dollar is some help in the health and well-being of our community. So that's all I want to contribute.
Thank you, Mark. We're not going to take any questions. We're going to go straight to George, and he's going to wrap us up before 12:30. George?
We might have time for a couple of questions of George.
No, you don't.
Well, if he stops now, I could do.
Well, if you stop. It's up to you, George. You've got 5 minutes. You can give the whole 5 to Councillor Barker, or you can keep them.
I won't take the whole 5. I'll just make 3 very quick points. Number one, 30% of tourism spend goes to tourism businesses. The other 70% goes to the wider community. The tourism industry, and the question's been asked by Councillor Curtin a number of times, what do they contribute? They contribute around about $500,000 a year in-kind activity, free activity. I've been coming here for 7 years. I've been put up free by the Quest Hotel every time I come here. That's a contribution they make, so it doesn't come out of the coffers of us, because they see they want to add to the 1.8 and build it so that it can actually be spent on promotion. All of the money that we have got in addition over the last 3 years has gone on promoting the region outside. None of it's gone on us. It's all gone on external promotion of the Bay. What it gives us is multi-seasonal promotions, and we've heard today the importance of shoulder, of how the economy, the economics of businesses are improved by an all-round promotion. So I think what you've been able to assess that there is a vast degree of support within the tourism industry for Hawke's Bay Tourism to continue to lead it and for you to continue to fund it. The very last thing I'd like to say is I just want to make an apology on behalf of Annie. She had a long-standing commitment to take her mother away for a very special birthday, and I told her she should do that. she worries about leaving it to me. I hope I've done her proud.
Thank you, George. Well, you have allowed for one question from Councillor Barker. No, I'm only going to take one.
Come on.
Well,
You broke all the rules
George,
today.
broken-
New Zealand for a long time had a process of cross-subsidisation, and we came to accept the principle those who benefit should pay, unless there was clear and compelling evidence otherwise. So what I'd like to hear from you is why should the tourism industry be effectively subsidised by ratepayers' rates, regardless of the Lawrence Yule's grandmothers thought that's great for her to pay half. Why should ratepayers pay for tourism, and why shouldn't the tourism industry pay for some of itself, putting aside the argument it's just too hard, because I don't accept it's just too hard.
Well, I think we all want to get over the it's too hard bit, and that's one of the suggestions we're making, that we would like to work with the Regional Council. The tools are in your hands, not ours. Why should people pay it? Because there is no other mechanism. It's all very well for, I said, primary industry say, well, nobody pays us, but there's single seller desk issues that, you know, they actually pay levies. They've got the money to do the promotion. So if you don't do it this way, it doesn't happen. It just won't occur. And therefore the growth, the economic growth that the region's experiencing will simply not be there. So it's the only way to do it. We all accept that we'd like a better mechanism, because I don't think we want to go through these debates year in, year out. And hopefully there is some opportunity on the horizon now with better tools, better engagement from government on the need to do that, that will provide a foundation. And I think what everybody's saying is, look, over the next 3 years, let's get a model that actually works for us from there on in. But during that time, don't reduce the funding to the point that it makes us ineffective.
Thank you very much, George. I have councillors putting their hands up all over the place. We'd be here till 4 o'clock if we allow everybody to get their point of view. So I really do appreciate the effort you have put into it, and I really do appreciate everyone here today who's turned up. You've done a marvellous job representing your industry and the contrary points of view as well. We've respected those as well. So Council will now deliberate on this, and I know you've done an enormous amount of work behind the scenes, and there's been lots of cups of coffee and discussion, so it didn't start and end today. It's just been a long journey since Council made its first decision, and appreciate the way that you've presented very professionally today. And I'd just like to acknowledge the huge amount of work that you personally have done and the contribution you have made to our region, because you don't live here. But you come backwards and forwards, and you've contributed enormously. So thank you very much. I'll just say that councillors will go to the Mohaka room for half an hour, and we'll be back in half an hour. Thank you very much, everybody.